In the early 1600s, England was not the dominant global empire. It was a secondary European power, facing debt, religious division, and competition from Spain and France. Yet within 3 centuries, English colonies in North America would become one of the most powerful nations in history. How did a relatively small island kingdom project power across an ocean and permanently transform an entire continent? And more importantly, was English colonization driven by religious freedom, economic survival, geopolitical rivalry, or something far more strategic? Before we dive into this deep historical analysis, if you value fact-based, research-driven documentary content that explores global history beyond myths and headlines, take a moment to subscribe, and share. It helps build a community focused on serious historical understanding. Now let's begin at the beginning. By the late 15th and 16th centuries, Spain and Portugal dominated overseas exploration. Following Christopher Columbus' 1492 voyage under the Spanish crown, Spain rapidly built an empire in the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. Vast quantities of silver and gold flowed back to Europe. England, however, entered the race late. In the 1500s, England faced economic instability, religious conflict after the Protestant Reformation, naval competition with Spain, limited domestic resources. Under Queen Elizabeth I, English privateers like Sir Francis Drake attacked Spanish ships and settlements, weakening Spain's dominance. But England realized something critical. To compete globally, it needed permanent colonies, not just piracy. But what kind of colonies would England build? Exploitation outposts like Spain, or something structurally different? England's first attempt at colonization came in 1587 with the Roanoke Colony in present-day North Carolina. The colony mysteriously disappeared. When supply ships returned in 1590, the settlement was abandoned. The only clue? The word Croatoan carved into a post. To this day, Roanoke remains one of the great historical mysteries, but failure did not end England's ambitions. Instead, it refined its strategy. Rather than direct royal colonies, England began using joint stock companies, early corporate models, to fund colonial ventures. This innovation would shape the future of colonization. In 1607, the Virginia Company established Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. The early years were brutal: starvation, disease, conflict with indigenous peoples, poor planning. Nearly 80% of the settlers died within the first year. The colony survived largely because of Captain John Smith's leadership, trade, and conflict with the Powhatan Confederacy. The eventual cultivation of tobacco by John Rolfe. Tobacco transformed Jamestown from a failing settlement into a profitable enterprise. But profit created new labor demands. At first, indentured servants were brought from England. By 1619, however, the first recorded Africans were brought to Virginia, marking the beginning of what would become race-based chattel slavery in English America. This was not yet a fully codified slave system, but the foundations were being laid. Why did English colonies transition from indentured labor to permanent slavery? And how did that decision reshape American society for centuries? While Virginia was economically motivated, New England's colonization had strong religious roots. In 1620, the Pilgrims arrived aboard the Mayflower, seeking religious autonomy. They signed the Mayflower Compact, an early form of self-governance agreement. Later, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was established by Puritans seeking to build what they called a city upon a hill. Unlike Spanish colonies, English settlements often included entire families, not just soldiers or administrators. This led to permanent communities, local governance structures, town meetings, religious institutions. English colonization was not just extraction. It was transplantation. English society was being replicated across the Atlantic. Colonization was not peaceful expansion into empty land. North America was home to millions of indigenous people with complex societies, trade networks, and political alliances. As English populations grew, land hunger intensified. Major conflicts erupted, including the Anglo-Powhatan Wars, King Philip's War 1675-1676. King Philip's War was one of the deadliest conflicts per capita in American history. Entire native communities were destroyed. English settlements were attacked. The war fundamentally shifted the balance of power in New England. By the late 17th century, English demographic growth began overwhelming indigenous resistance in many regions. Disease, especially smallpox, had already devastated native populations before large-scale English expansion. Colonization was therefore a combination of military conflict, biological catastrophe, demographic expansion, legal land displacement. In the southern colonies, plantation economies expanded. Rice in South Carolina, indigo, tobacco in Virginia, labor demands intensified. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, slavery became codified into law. The transatlantic slave trade integrated English America into a triangular trade system, manufactured goods from England. Enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic. Raw materials sent back to Europe. This system generated immense wealth, but at catastrophic human costs. Slavery became central to the economic foundation of English America. This contradiction, liberty rhetoric alongside slavery, would shape future American identity. Unlike Spanish colonies, English settlements developed local assemblies. Virginia's House of Burgesses, 1619, became one of the first representative institutions in North America. Over time, distance from London created increasing autonomy. Colonists developed local governance habits, taxation authority, militia organization, independent economic networks. By the 18th century, the English colonies had grown economically powerful and demographically large. But a paradox emerged. They were culturally English, yet politically distant. This tension would eventually lead to revolution. English colonization did not just reshape America, it reshaped the world. The colonies became a base for Atlantic trade, a contributor to British naval power, a driver of agricultural exports, a laboratory for representative governance. After the American Revolution in 1776, the United States emerged a state built on English legal traditions, language, and political philosophy. Ironically, English colonization produced a very power that would eventually surpass Britain itself. English colonization of America was not a single event. It was a layered process driven by economic competition, religious conflict, geopolitical rivalry, corporate innovation, demographic expansion. It combined ambition and brutality, opportunity and displacement, freedom narratives and forced labor systems. It created new political models while destroying existing civilizations, and it ultimately shifted the global center of gravity from Europe toward North America. The English did not simply conquer land. They transplanted a society, and in doing so, they reshaped global history. If this documentary helped you understand the deeper forces behind early American history, like this video to support research-driven content. Comment which period of colonial history we should explore next. Share this with someone interested in global history. Subscribe for more in-depth geopolitical and historical analysis. History is not just about the past. It is about understanding how today's world was built.